So today we're going to be taking a look at a scenario where Doggerland comes back. Now Doggerland was a geographical area, more specifically a piece of land that was in between Denmark and Great Britain around 8 to 12,000 years ago. In the modern day it is currently underwater, but what if it came back? It may seem like a small piece of land, however there are many European countries that do border it, like the UK, France, Belgium, the Netherlands, Germany, and Denmark. And it's located primarily in Western Europe, meaning that there's probably going to be some colonialism happening here as well as a few wars. So if you guys do enjoy today's video, make sure to leave a like on it and subscribe to the channel if you're new. All the support is greatly appreciated as we're trying to get to 200,000 subscribers relatively soon. We're around 3,000 away, so we're getting super close, and when we do get there, I will be live streaming it, so make sure to tune into that. Anyway, let's go ahead and jump straight into this video. Also, apologies for not having a video on Monday. I'm sick. So, Doggerland has just resurfaced, that it has risen out of the water, and Europe is very confused. The UK is no longer an island, it now touches mainland Europe, and it also touches France. I'm sure they're really happy about that. But of course, like I said, the initial reaction to Doggerland's return is probably confusion. Both NATO and the EU would be meeting to figure out what exactly to do with this piece of land, but for the sake of this video and for the sake of making this scenario interesting, we're going to go ahead and assume that there is no treaty that is going to prevent colonization of Doggerland, and thus that's what we're going to have happen. So the British, being the British, are going to be the first ones to colonize Doggerland. They will send in some of their exploration forces to take over this portion of Doggerland. So this will all now be claimed by the United Kingdom, and as soon as the UK starts to move in, so do other European countries, but more specifically the Dutch, who want to go ahead and get as much land as possible because they are tired of sinking into the ocean. Now, as you'll notice, some of these European countries were reshaped by the re-emergence of Doggerland. Like, for example, Denmark looks a lot more rounded, and the Netherlands looks pretty unrecognizable, but that won't be the case for long, as these guys will begin to move out and colonize this land. The next country to make a move over here is Belgium. They will go ahead and send in their exploration forces, and the main priority of these lowland countries is to get as much land as possible, because as things are, these are not very big countries, but there is opportunity of growth with the re-emergence of this sector of land. Next up, we have the French getting involved. They will send in some exploration forces, but more specifically, they're going to get right onto the border of the United Kingdom, which I'm sure neither of these countries will enjoy that. But France really doesn't have too much opportunity to get land here because Doggerland does stop at the English Channel. So while they do connect up with the UK, that's probably as far as they're going to go, especially as UK forces meet up with Belgian forces and completely cut off France from the rest of this piece of land. The next country to go ahead and start colonizing is Denmark. Now they have a very large coast along this new piece of land, and they'll be using that to their advantage, having the most land claimed out of any of the European countries so far. The next country to start colonizing is Germany, and they will do much of the same as Denmark. Their main priority is to get as much land as possible, and while they do have a smaller coast than Denmark, they still get a large chunk comparable in size to the United Kingdom. Now you might be thinking that that's probably going to be all the European countries that are going to be colonizing Doggerland. Well, that's not true, because Norway is going to be getting involved. They will be colonizing this northern part of Doggerland, more specifically around this little bay here. They'll go ahead and meet up with Danish forces and begin to cut them off, but they'll also go ahead and go around the northwestern coast of Doggerland. And something interesting to mention here is that this kind of interrupts the trade routes of Europe. Now, of course, normally you would have trade going through the English Channel and around up across Denmark, but now you have to go all the way around the British Isles and then through this strait between Norway and Doggerland, and then you can finally get to the Baltic Sea to, trade with Russia or the Baltics or so on and so forth. So the re-emergence of Doggerland does make that one aspect of economy a little bit more difficult, but there might be more economic gains from the resources in Doggerland, so there's that as well. I don't know if that necessarily cancels it out, but it could. Anyway, back to the UK now. They are going to be doing some more colonizing because that's what the UK does best. They will now reach all the way over here to Norway and will now have the title as the largest colony in Doggerland. Next up, the Dutch go ahead and try to get even more land. They want to prevent ever being underwater again, like I said earlier. So yeah, land is a priority for the Dutch. But as far as the remaining land in Doggerland, there isn't much. So the next few countries to expand their colony are the Norwegians, the Danish, the Germans, Belgians, the Dutch again, and finally, and once more, the British. So as soon as Doggerland reemerges, it gets instantly colonized by the Europeans. The British do have the largest colony, and that is most likely thanks to the fact that they have a very large coast with Doggerland. But of course, the UK is a strong country. They have more resources and a lot more money to use in this colonization process. But at the same time, you look at the Norwegians and the Danish, and they have huge colonies as well. And that's due to the fact that this sector of land in Doggerland is far away from these stronger European powers, as highlighted with the small colony that France has. Now, more likely than not, in a realistic scenario, what we would have happening here is that these colonies would be fully annexed by these countries. And that would end up looking something like this, and the video would end here. but that would be kind of boring, right? And extremely short. So instead, we're not going to have that happen. While this new map of Europe would look pretty cool and it would definitely make for some interesting scenarios, it would be far more interesting to single in on Doggerland and ignore the outside European powers. But in order for that to happen, we have to have a few colonial revolutions take place, or maybe some granting of independence. So we're going to have to put on our hypothetical caps here. We're going to also have to put on our ignoration caps here, because we are going to be ignoring a lot of things, like the fact that the UK would crush any rebellion that happened in Doggerland because they are literally right next to their colony, or the fact that there's like no people living here. We're just going to assume this takes place maybe 50 years later once Doggerland is properly populated. And on top of that assumption, we're going to also say that the EU is kind of in favor of giving this region autonomy and independence, meaning that all of the EU nations over here in like Eastern Europe or Southern Europe will more likely than not be funding these colonies in their revolutions or independence movements, adding a little bit of realism to this scenario, but not a whole lot, because once again, we are assuming that they're going to be able to break away. But yeah, enough of that realism stuff. We don't do that here. The first colony of Doggerland that is going to be seeking independence is going to be the Norwegian colony, and that's for a very simple reason. They don't border Norway. They're separated by ocean. So out of all of the colonial claims here, this makes the most sense to actually want independence in a realistic way, which is impossible to even consider because Doggerland isn't coming back unless we dam the British Channel and also dam the North Sea. That's not possible either though. But yeah, these guys are separated from mainland Norway, and whenever there is some sort of separation from like the motherland, then that often calls for independence movements to happen, even if they are very minuscule. Take, for example, like a British overseas territory, there's definitely going to be independence movements there, much similar to how the United States has an independence movement in Puerto Rico. Although it's not super strong and it doesn't have a ton of momentum, it is still there and it is still prominent. So that logic will be applying here, and we have the first country of Doggerland breaking away. Now, of course, when this happens, they will be drawn into a war with Norway, but like I said earlier, we're going to assume that these guys are going to be capable of rebelling and also will be receiving funds from an organization like the EU. So local colonial Norwegian forces will already be stationed here and will aim to retake their colony, however with support of outside countries and their own nationalism, which is one hell of a drug, as highlighted by the fact that they are kicking out all of the Norwegian colonizers. And there we go, all the Norwegian colonizers have been vanquished. And we have our first independent country over here in Doggerland. Their capital city will be right here near the entrance of this bay, but this movement is going to inspire a ton of other independence movements within Doggerland. But to be more specific, we have the Dutch colony breaking away from the Netherlands and striving for independence as well. The Dutch will quickly send their forces into their former colony, wanting to get as much land back as possible because the Dutch are terrified of not having land, but are more so terrified of the blue water. When things start to not look good for the Dutch colony, we have the northern Doggerland country joining the war. Despite their language differences and all of that, they still recognize that Doggerland should probably be its own independent thing away from these Western European countries who have had enough fun and enough colonization throughout history. Also, that's the wrong color. Let's do this right. So with them joining in the war, the Dutch will now start to be pushed back by the two colonial countries, who at this point have become fairly strong European countries due to the around 50 years of development by the Western European powers. Now, once again, we are going to have to assume that they're strong enough to push back a country like the Netherlands, who at this point is sending all of their military in hopes of getting at least some land in a possible peace agreement, but eventually volunteer forces from other countries and maybe even colonies begin to enter in, and this pushes back the Dutch army all the way to their own border. Now, one particular area that the colonies fail to push back is over here in the southwesternmost point of this colony, and it is here that Dutch forces hold out and the blue team is unable to push into. After a few more weeks of fighting and a few more weeks of stalemate, the two sides finally come to an agreement, and the Dutch will be able to keep this piece of land. So let's go ahead and take a look at this peace treaty. And in this treaty here, what we have happening is the Dutch will annex this small portion of land down here, and this colony will get its independence, with its capital being right here in the middle of the country. So at this point, we already have two colonies in Doggerland getting their independence, and the Western European powers are getting a little bit worried about the future of Doggerland and the future of their colonies more specifically. With all of the independence that has been happening in central Doggerland, some other colonies are now threatening to break away from their European overlords, but some countries won't allow it to escalate into a full-on revolution. Instead, they're going to be willing to make some compromises. Heading over here to Denmark, they make a deal with their colony. In exchange for independence, the Danish will get this piece of land up here from the Doggerland colony, and that is just a bunch of coastal land along the Baltic Sea, which will be good for trade and development of the Danish country. And everyone's happy at the end of the day because the colony gets its independence from Denmark, and there's no need for revolution. These guys' capital city will of course be right here near the center, where all of the major cities are. And now there's only 4 Doggerland colonies remaining, the one from Germany, the UK, France, and then Belgium. Germany, the UK, and France are all top 20 countries in terms of military rankings, but Belgium does not reach that threshold at all. And when their colony starts to request independence, or more so demand independence, the Belgians are going to have to go ahead and let it happen, because Belgium is just not good at fighting wars, let's be honest here. So like I said, these guys are going to be getting their independence fairly simply, and now there is 5 independent countries in Doggerland and only 3 colonies remaining. Now at this point things are going to change a little bit, because the independence movements in Germany, the UK, and France are being fairly suppressed, and the fact that these 3 countries are a lot stronger than the other countries means that these colonies are not going to be able to break away so easily. So Doggerland will go mostly quiet for a few years. The independence movements in the other colonies are small, but they are gaining strength, while in the independent countries, things are beginning to brew. War is beginning to brew. The red team will be attacking the blue team in a purely expansionist conquest. There is no real interest in this war other than gaining land and hence gaining power and population. Unfortunately for this smaller country down here, they are not going to stand any chance. Remember, this country was the first to break away and the first to get their independence, meaning that they have had more time to gain more strength, gain more population, and build their country to be capable of doing what they have just done. So the blue team will be falling here. Now what about the Dutch? Would they help out their former colony? The answer to that is probably no. That's because, remember, the colony broke away from them, so it's kind of like, why would we even help you? So in this treaty here, we see full annexation by the Northern Doggerland country. No longer does the Dutch colony exist. It is now just a part of Central Doggerland, which is the name we are going to be giving this country from here on forth. Now at this point, the Central Doggerland country is not done just yet. They're going to be sending their armies that are stationed down here up to the border of the former Danish colony. And once their troops are lined up on the border of this country, the message is kind of clear. We're coming to take your land. And that's exactly what they start to do as forces move in and target the capital city area of this country and easily take it. We then see the rest of the offensive forces move in as they move to clear in any settlements or military bases that are happening in this country. They reach the border of Denmark and are met by an entourage of Danish troops, but they don't fight each other because the Danish troops are mostly just stationed for defensive purposes. Now, I'm not too sure how strong the red country is in comparison to Denmark at this point. 50 years is a lot of time, but when you're talking about country building and nation building, those things can take even longer than just 50 years. So, realistically, and, I know that we aren't doing anything realistic here, but the red team probably wouldn't be stronger than Denmark at this point, but because I said so, it is. And that's why we see Danish troops on the border. But as for the fate of the blue team, the fate is, well, death. So the former Danish country will be fully annexed by the Central Doggerland country, and at this point, we're just going to be referring to this country as Doggerland. So, the name of Central Doggerland was very short-lived. Now they're just referred to as Doggerland. And even despite their recent aggressive territorial expansion, they are becoming a fairly popular country due to their geographical location. Now, let's talk about the other colonies real quick. The British colony is completely under control. The independence movements there are being largely suppressed. In France, there really isn't too much happening here. I mean, there's, first of all, not a whole lot of people living here. There's like one settlement right here. But this land is fairly useless, and the French don't really have a need for it. And then over here to the German colony, things are getting a little bit violent here. The protests are not being suppressed very well. And the Germans are doing their best to allow for the freedom of expression, though it's just getting a little out of hand as more and more people in this colony are rising up against their overlords and are wanting for the independence of their country. Now, for our next event happening in Doggerland, it is actually a pretty peaceful one. The former Belgian colony will be making the decision to unite with the Doggerland country, and this is finally a peaceful acquisition for Doggerland. No longer do they have to go on these territorial conquests because they now have united all of the colonial countries of Doggerland. Sure, all the people here would be speaking a different language like French or Dutch or Norwegian or Danish, but the idea of Doggerland is what's keeping them all together. Remember, this video is about Doggerland. If you've been taking a shot every time I said Doggerland, you are not awake right now. But I don't think any of you are old enough to be drinking, so let's move on. With the acquisition of the Belgian colony, the population of Doggerland has become very high. We are now going to go ahead and fast forward another 50 years, so it has been 100 years around about since the reemergence of Doggerland, probably maybe about 120. But Doggerland is now a stable European nation. This is above all highlighted by the fact that they have joined the European Union, which means they're also using the euro and they have free travel amongst other EU countries like Denmark, Germany, the Netherlands, and Belgium. It is also possible that these guys could try to join NATO, although I do find that a little bit less likely due to the fact that it just simply isn't important for Doggerland to join. Anyway, with all the time that has passed, Doggerland has become a very strong country and also a fairly wealthy country, now having a larger economy than countries like Belgium, the Netherlands, and Denmark. Their economy might be on par with something like Ireland or Czechia, maybe Austria, Switzerland, maybe Hungary. But with all this money acquired and all of the development they've had, as well as improvement of healthy relationships with France, the UK, and other major European countries, they're going to be making an acquisition from France, and that acquisition, of course, is the French colony in Doggerland. Now, I could not give you an exact price as to how much France would sell this piece of land for. I'd imagine that it would be for a fairly large chunk of change. It's not a huge piece of land, but also it has like coastal land. But once again, France isn't really using it for anything, so it's kind of useless for them. So it might be a little bit cheaper than we might imagine it being. But economist, I guess, or geopolitical economist, I don't even know how you would value that much land, especially considering we're 120 years down the road. So if anyone can do the math for that, let me know in the comments. How much would that piece of land sell for in 120 years? So once again, Doggerland expands as a country. It is getting really close to being just the full-on piece of Doggerland, minus the land from Germany that they still have, the land from the UK, and then of course the land that the Dutch stole from their former colony. And speaking of the Dutch, it is time for Doggerland to go to war with a European power. Now, I know they just joined the EU and stuff, and like the EU would heavily retaliate against this. But you know what? Doggerland was like, screw you. We don't like the Dutch. We're taking their land. So no response will be had by the Europeans because they are sleeping right now. Yes, they attacked in the midst of night. Therefore, no response is necessary. The Doggerland country will go ahead and take over the entire area of the Netherlands. And let's be honest here. Is anyone really going to notice that the Dutch are gone? I mean, let's be real. Who's noticing? Not me. So the Doggerlanders will go ahead and add the entire country of the Netherlands to their country, also adding in major cities like Amsterdam and Rotterdam. So that's a huge population boost for them, as well as just a ton of developed land that they can use to further the growth of their country. So now Doggerland is becoming a lot more powerful. They have now surpassed the economic threshold that was Hungary, and now have military strength that is similar to countries like Bulgaria, Romania, and Serbia. Like these three, I'm not actually sure if these guys are similar in military strength at all. I might have just given you three random numbers there. But I guess to set a better point, let's go ahead and say that these guys are as strong as Portugal. And with all this power and influence, they are going to finally start to lobby the UK and Germany to release their colonies and allow for the unification of Doggerland. Zooming back in on the protest in Germany, these things are still not going well, and Germany still is not doing a good job of putting them down. And it's getting to a point now where it's just like, here, damn, you can have it. Germany will just go ahead and straight up relinquish their colony over to Doggerland because they just don't want to deal with it anymore. The people there were so rowdy and so in support of joining the larger Doggerland country that Germany just gave it up for free. Yeah, no price, just here, take it. That's probably the easiest acquisition that Doggerland has had so far. But, as you'll see, there's still just one little piece of land that Doggerland still needs to get a hold of, and that, of course, is the UK's colony. Now, of course, this would likely be integrated into the UK by now, so the real border of this place will look something like this, which is, I think that's hideous. I think. Is that hideous? It's pretty bad. It's not horrible, but it's pretty bad. So Doggerland will go ahead and send a message to the UK, and the message is basically, give Doggerland area, please. The UK will, of course, say no to that because the UK is greedy land hoggers. So you know what that means? It's time for war. Doggerland will be taking on an opponent that is much stronger than them, and that, of course, is the United Kingdom. Now, we're going to ignore NATO here. We're going to say that NATO doesn't exist. I'm, like, losing my voice right now because of my sickness. I'm sorry. Because if NATO was involved, then Doggerland would be clapped back to the 19th century, and, yeah, we don't want that to happen. Goodbye, NATO. Hello, war with the UK. Now, when this war does break out, we have the easternmost areas of the Doggerland colony going ahead and breaking away officially, meaning that there is already a slight advantage for Doggerland here. They'll send their armies into the northern area, but will fail on capturing this major city here, and additionally, they will be repelled down here in the south all the way back to their border. We then also see British troops cross the border and begin to head into the major city areas, but have no fear, Doggerland, because the Allies are here. France is going to be getting involved in this war, as well as Ireland, because of course they are. I mean, let's be real here, the UK fighting a war against Doggerland. First of all, you know, France probably has really good relations with Doggerland, but also there's no NATO anymore, meaning that if they really wanted to, they could jump the UK. We all know why Ireland would do this, because 26 plus 6 equals 1, but France would do it just for the love of the game. So the Irish will move into Northern Ireland and secure what should be theirs. The French will begin to send boats across the English Channel, having a reverse D-Day invasion of the British Isles. They borrowed their plans from Germany, maybe. Now, after being jumped on all sides from 3 countries, the British army will be in full-on retreat, as the aura of Doggerland is too much for them. This major city up here will be captured to the surprise of many British generals who were then fired, but they weren't fired soon enough, because the Doggerland people are now in this other major city, and more specifically, they're on the border of the British Isles. My voice is dying right now, I'm sorry. Totally not trying to speed this up so I can give my voice a rest. Yeah, maybe probably shouldn't have recorded today, but hey, I need a video on Wednesday. I cannot do a whole week with only one video. That would be taboo. That's against my religion, and my religion is the grind. So yeah, basically what we have happening here is the UK getting just obliterated by the French, Irish, and the Doggerlanders. And yeah, I know the UK is a top 10 military power. Guess what? I don't care. Yeah, you rule the seas, we get it. But that doesn't really matter when you're, you know, having a rebellion in Scotland and also getting invaded from an actual land. Yeah, the British just, they don't know how to respond to this because they've never been invaded by a piece of land that is connected to them. Only usually people on boats, like, you know, the whole France, English thing. Yeah, we all know the history book. Let's just go ahead and finish off this peace treaty. So in this treaty here, we have Doggerland finally being fully connected. Now, as you'll see, Doggerland has a lot of major cities in it. More major cities than France, Germany, the UK, maybe the UK. I don't think so much as like India or China, but you guys are picking up what I'm putting down here. A lot of people living here. I'm going to resurrect Doggerland in real life, and I need your help. We're going to build a massive dam between Scotland and Norway. How long will it take? Years. Thousands of years. How much money will it take? More than there probably is in the world. You know how we're going to do it though? The power of friendship and the will to resurrect Doggerland. Anyway, though, that is going to do it for today's video on what if Doggerland did come back. I know that this was a, you know, unrealistic and just silly video overall, but I hope you guys did enjoy it. I do want to go ahead and once again reiterate that we are getting super close to 200,000 subscribers, around 3,000 away, and actually I think more so, if I want to be more specific and more exciting, we're around 2,900 away. So that's extremely close, and I think we can get there relatively soon, definitely by the end of September. Let's try to get there by like mid-September. Just not on September 6th or 7th. I can't do a live stream on those days. I won't be here. I'll be back home. Well, this is my home now, but like, I mean, back home where I grew up. Anyway, once again, thank you all so much for watching this video. Make sure to show some support on it by leaving a like and commenting below your guys' suggestions, as well as your input and what you liked about the video. What do you think would happen if Doggerland came back? I mean, obviously, we all know that the Europeans would just divide it up, but in the sense of like kind of what happened here. What if it just got colonized and the colonies broke away, so on and so forth. Also, do make sure to check out our membership program for early access to each and every single one of my videos, such as this one. Hi, channel members. And yeah, we got a ton of other stuff. Make sure to join the Discord server as well. We have a mock government going on there. And we just recently had elections. That was super fun. It was a very close election between the 2 prime minister candidates. There's also like 21 senators that got elected. It's just a huge mock government / roleplay, and it's super fun. It actually functions as a government. So if you are interested in that kind of stuff, make sure to join the Discord server. And even if you aren't interested in it, there's still just a general Discord server where you can talk to me, talk to the community, and just share your ideas, share your maps, so on and so forth. So check that out if you haven't already. It's a lot better than any of the previous Discord servers we've had. We made sure to keep it on topic and keep it within our communities. But all of the people there, you know, are actual fans of the channel. So anyway, once again, thank you all for watching this video, and I'll see you all in the next one. And of course, thank you to all our super fans. This includes Sermonator, Static FN, Jazzy Jerboa, Chill Turn Mapping, CTG on YT, Omega the YouTuber, Vista Mapper, Garbage Trucks, Pro Wixo, 7353, Gamer, RS, Australian Geoball Mapping, Augusto, Norwegian, Gail Martinez, Frizioid, Laser Taze, Pablo Sigma Cat, Toad 45, Death Strider X, and DW Cool Dude. Once again, thank you guys,